Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Workpuls Productivity Talks. Borna here as always, and today with me I have Filip. He's the CEO and owner of ELA, a global creative agency. So Andrea, tell us first a little bit about what it is that you guys exactly do.
Yeah, so we're a global creative ad agency. So we build brand campaigns for a variety of clients, from entertainment to CPG, tech. We have tech clients. So we're really a strategic agency. We launch products in the world, both nationally and globally, and agnostic of medium. So anywhere from TV to digital to video, social, all those things.
Okay, cool. And what would you say that productivity is, first of all?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's many ways to answer that. What I think the cleanest answer would be productivity is really having a set of, let's say, goals and and getting there as quickly and efficiently as possible. But I think that, to me, productivity is a bigger topic. And what I mean by that is, I think that people need to understand the spirit and the buy-in of what everybody's trying to do. And I think that once people are emotionally connected, what the bigger plan is, expression of that deeper and bigger understanding, and then people start working together, in a different way, in a more collaborative way that gets them to the goal because they understand it, versus having a small little milestone to hit. I think that that's easy. I think the bigger thing is getting big buy-in on what the goal is.
Okay, and do you think that the productivity can be quantified somehow and measured?
Yeah, so I think there's a science part and an emotional part, right? I think obviously the simplest way to do it is to say, these 10 things need to be achieved, and did those 10 things happen, right? But I think that the bigger measurement is how collaborative and how people work together to achieve those goals, right? So I think that productivity is not just based on putting in the hours and the time, but I also think it's about being efficient. And I think that for us, for example, we're constantly looking at our process and seeing, are we being as efficient and effective as possible? And I think that, having a lengthy process could be great, but I also think that we always look for, is there a better way to achieve our goal? Are we doing it in the most efficient way? Are there steps that we need to add or take away? And sometimes, and that's very critical, right? Because sometimes you need to add a step to speed you up. It's not always, let's do it in as few steps as possible. I think sometimes it's adding a few extra steps so that you get there in a quicker way, even though at first glance it might seem like we're adding an additional layer of a conversation, a meeting, a process, a document, whatever that may, a piece of technology, whatever that is, at first glance seems to be counterproductive. But I think that process is critical, and questioning your process consistently is also critical.
Okay, and besides questioning the process, what it is that you do with your team in order to maximize on everyone's productivity? I mean, you're working in a creative environment, so productivity is the most essential, probably, to get the creative juices flowing around.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we always, in what we do, we have insane deadlines in the advertising world, and we have to be productive and creative, but also be effective. And I think that what we do to implement that is we always start with the end in mind. We never work toward a goal. We work away from a goal. I think that if we ever work towards something, we would fail and crash and burn, because there's many layers of productivity and what people need to do. So we always start with the end in mind and work backward in a very logical format to say, well, if this has to happen by, let's say, Friday, what must happen on Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, and you back out of it. And that kind of gives you a roadmap. And I think that without a fundamental roadmap, you're just walking towards something, and you're victim to realizing that the day before something's due, that you're missing 5 things that nobody thought about. And so I think that having a micro and macro view perspective at all times is critical to productivity. Know where you're going, take, and then work back, and then focus on hitting those individual milestones, because it's like a domino effect. If you don't hit that one, things have to change. You have to be flexible, but you need to understand the roadmap. And I think that sometimes the roadmap is in the mind of the people who created it, but not distributed and completely bought into by every single human being on the team that is working on it. So you know, for a team, you should be able to walk into up to any team member and ask them, you know, what's the plan for the day, and what's the goal, and what's our deadlines, and everyone should be able to answer that. And an extension of that is early and often. What we like to say, we do early and often check-ins, and not just once a week, but once a day, and sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day, depending on you know, on the intensity of what we need to do. And I think that, you know, when you check in on your productivity, on your workflow, on a goal, and you and it's very aggressive, you can't afford to lose a day. So therefore, you can't find out at 5 p.m. that maybe we're only 50% there when we should be 90% there. And so I think early and often check-ins with the entire team is something that ensures that you hit those deadlines, which goes back to, that may sound very cumbersome to some people listening, but the amount of time that you save by having 10 or 15-minute conversations is a lot more than having to undo or redo something for the lack of that 1 hour of a conversation that you had.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on the industry. Like your industry is completely different, so you have to be, because of those tight deadlines and everything, you have to be on top of what's happening every day, in and out. In some other industries, it's not really like that, so people have a bit more space to work at. They don't have the deadlines that are as tight. They don't have the clients that are waiting for them, and so on. But it's a good way to operate in the industry that you're operating, I guess. And I wanted to ask you, like, how do you get I've heard managers complaining, like they want to implement something, they are looking to start doing this new thing that could help them increase productivity, but they aren't really sure how to get employee buy-in on that. What do you think was the best way to get employee buy-in on any of the strategies that you're trying to put in to increase productivity, or basically anything else that you want to change?
Yeah, I think it's getting, first of all, it's getting egos out of the way, because no one wants to be told like, hey, we need to be more productive, because what people hear is we're not productive enough, right? And people are still working, and they're working hard. And I think that productivity has to be very clarified, that it's not a matter of how hard you work, it's about how efficient we are. So I think it's not a productivity conversation, it's an efficiency conversation, right? And I think that's something that business leaders and managers can have with their team is efficiency, because productivity sounds very personal, like it's an attack. You know, hey, Bob, you're not being productive, versus, hey, Bob, how can we be more efficient? Completely different, same topic. So I think that efficiency is the right way to look at it, and not productivity. We don't use the word productivity. It's like, how can we get there easier, faster, more effective, right? And so I think that would be my biggest advice. And to your earlier point, you know, I've consulted with many businesses that are completely outside the advertising and marketing world, but I would say that communication is the one thing that I've seen across any industry that is lacking. It's because everybody's in front of computers, they're typing, they're emailing, but the organic, the real conversation, the real dialogue, that you'd be surprised that don't happen at the largest organizations, that people aren't talking to each other. And I think that good old-fashioned conversation down the hallway is something that is priceless to me, as old school as that sounds.
Well, it is. It makes sense. I think we've seen that now in the situation that we're in, where everybody is working from home, and you don't get to see your team, and don't get to walk up to somebody's desk, and there's no, like, it's you're messaging, you're sending emails. Okay, we do meetings, video calls, and all that, but still, you're not talking to those people as frequently as you used to do when you were in the office. So you can really feel that difference. And it's just, I'm not sure how can people just work in an office and not have those types of conversations throughout the day, no matter how busy they are.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, for us, you know, we've been implementing, even though everyone's working from home, what we've been doing is saying, okay, you know what, let's try to increase the amount of Google Hangouts that we have so that we can actually see each other and still kind of mimic the conversation, but in a digital format versus using Slack or, you know, texting or emailing. Is just, you know what, let's just get on a quick call. And I think that's proven to be at least a good band-aid approach to that process.
Yeah, I noticed that we had tried to do like daily meetings, then we realized daily meetings were too much for what we were doing, so we cut it to 2 meetings per week, like a weekly meeting. And then today we realized that it doesn't make sense to do two, it's better to do just one. So we're still trying and testing what we can do, because it's the first time that we're all out of the office at the same time. We do have work from home policy, but it has never happened that the whole company is out of the office at the same time.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's been a trial period for everyone. Well, lucky enough, we have a couple of people also who have a lot of experience working in remote environments, and they have been really helpful throughout this process when it comes to everything, setting up
Right.
at home, managing your workload from home, and all the other things that we needed for support. So that's a good thing. I wanted to check also, have you tried any of those, let's say, like standard or usual time management techniques that are supposed to help you increase productivity or stay on top of your to-do list or whatever? Have you tried those yourself or with your team, and what were the outcomes of that?
Yeah, you know, not so much like from a time management, but more software that allows us to track. And I think that tracking is the biggest thing, because, you know, part of productivity is ownership. And I think that's another thing that I've seen in a lot of organizations is there's a lot of people working on one thing, but who's the quarterback, right? Who's the one that's ultimately, you know, owning this project, and what is everybody's role? Because sometimes there be an owner of this project, and then the next project you're a support peer person on that team, right? So we've played around with, you know, different ways of doing that, of tracking that. And again, every business is different. You know, we may have, you know, 30 to 50 projects in a given day. So it's so part of it is making sure that if we do have a software or something that we're using, that also has to have the human element, because someone has to be in there live time, always tracking. So I think that, you know, for us, it's been very helpful to, you know, again, we have a global, let's say a Gantt chart, if you will, for lack of a better terms, that we can understand where we are on everything. And I think that, you know, having multiple projects or multiple deliverables is important to see. You know, maybe one day you have 10 things going on, but we know that in 2 days we have 50 things going on, so we can ebb and flow. And I think part of productivity is forecasting, so it doesn't catch you by surprise. And I think you would agree, right? Like, we need to know what's coming. And although the project that you are on is the most important thing, it lives in a bigger ecosystem, which affects resources, which affects your timing and things like that. And we see it time and time again. You might need to get an approval, and the person is completely booked and you can't get them for 2 days, but it's due in one day. So is that because the person is so busy, or because we didn't forecast for it? So I think that forecasting, it to me, is critical to productivity, and having technology that's able to see what's coming so that the wave doesn't hit you, and that all the players that need to be involved absolutely know ahead of time what's happening in their lives and what they need to, you know, move around or be available for.
I guess that goes in line with the strategy, with the planning strategy that you have, going from the end to the start line and planning from the end to the start line what needs to happen every day. I guess it makes it easier to forecast all together what's going to happen within the next few days or within the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I think that also is a we're a product of our environment when it comes to, for example, video production or a film, right? When it comes to video production, you may be on set for 1 or 2 days, actually shooting. The pre-production that goes into it is a month to a month and a half for one day. And so I share that with you and the audience because I think that having more time up front to plan and to think about all the things that we need, but also that can go wrong, and developing a plan is critical, so that there's a planning phase and then there's an action phase. And an example of that when we shoot commercials is we might be planning for a month, but we're not thinking on set. We're executing the plan. And so I think there's a time for planning, a time for execution. And I think that when you're planning and executing at the same time, productivity is absolutely affected. And that's where ball starts getting dropped, because it's two sides of the mind. So that's another example of slow down to speed up. It might seem like we're wasting time, but the more clarity and the more specificity we have on the front end, because everybody's excited thing. We want people to be excited. We want them to want to run and go, but we really want to plan out so that when you're actually making, building, and executing, you have 99% of your questions answered, and now you're in execution mode. And those are just two different sides of the brain.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, when it comes to my end, when it comes to the questions that I had, that would be all. I don't know if you wanted to share anything else, if I skipped something or something like that.
No, I think, again, I think my biggest advice to anybody is when everybody is working as one, and, at ELA, we have the spirit of one, right? Where we're like a task force that moves together. And I think that keeping people together, even though I know that right now we're physically not together, but keeping everybody in the loop. So if you think, a lot of times what I see is there could be a team of, let's say on one project, there's 15 people on a team, but only 4 people are having the daily conversations. I think it's important to get everybody involved on the team, even if you don't think that they're critical to the conversation, because you would be surprised at how many times somebody that you don't think is maybe executing something and is not, you don't think they should be part of the conversation, actually adds a ton of value to that dialogue. Actually has a perspective on something. So I would say move as one, right? Work as many, but we move together. So I think that to me is ultimate productivity, and that emotional buy-in. So everybody is there's no disparate people working in different zones. Everybody's kind of moving together.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. It was really interesting to hear the perspective of somebody who's working in such a busy environment usually. So thank you very much for that.